child that happened that formed me. Some that had trauma. Yet with the burst of my soul, my own healing, and my soul growth, I can see things through a compassion for the place of other people's souls, my parents and siblings. All of these writings are intended to fashion a picture of the stages of life I have gone through. Not perfectly, of course, or would it be suggested that anyone else's would be the same? Somehow there is the child's soul here, the inner child, and while not all may have been lifted up, it is still a valid voice, a voice that speaks here. There were some really beautiful memories of my childhood. I remember we used to have this babysitter take care of us. Even at my early age, I could see she had beauty. That's why I kind of recognize this energy of form, in the feminine form. I remember her coming to tuck me in. It was some of the few times I looked forward to going to bed. She had a positive impression on me as a little boy. Somehow she would say positive things she believed would happen to me. When I was reading this, I thought about the power of influence that others have in our lives. When we affirm something in the formation of a soul, that can carry that soul for years and years and years. Conversely, if people are beaten down, they go into that state of self-belief that really affects them, okay? Then I would go off to sleep with a little smile on my face. Maybe it was the first budding of love, but it was pure. It was innocent. Later, we would learn she herself would grow up to be Miss Merced. And that was a town where my parents, I was like, a child, 5, 6, in Central California. That was the town we lived in. I would later say in life, my first babysitter was a beauty queen. I think she was an angel too. But for most part, all was not peaceful. My father was a drinker, and he was mean-spirited when he got drunk. I remember being in that house that we lived in. I never really felt comfortable there, especially when he was home. I thought, I don't even feel at home on earth. And who is this guy? And this relates to this concept of my soul biting of like, what is family? What is human life? What is 3D? I didn't know what that word meant, but I knew that I didn't really feel this was my natural state, even at that early age. So whether it was this biting of spiritual sense, it was there in this little boy. I think in a way I did develop a reaction to being indoors, which is another lifelong pattern, okay? We knew as kids when my father would come home and if it was dark, it often meant he had been to the bar. I even remember the name of the bar. It was called Carl's. I tried to comfort my little sister when we were small. I tried to reassure her. I tried to protect her. In my own way, my own little mind, I believe my father did not belong in our family. This is another concept that came to me because I think in my relationships, I started to learn to rescue women. You know what I mean? And to pick these women that needed. And so that was another psychology that I felt I learned to transcend. But I can see a lot of this got formed in childhood, okay? I even think back then I tried to figure out, and then there's this concept of who is this man? He doesn't feel like father. This is not father's knows best, Who is he? What's a role here? So there's a question. I even think back then I tried to figure out why these people would be parents. I could accept my brothers and sisters. We felt like we were a group. If you're wondering where my mother was, she was there. But it was like there were two worlds. One when my mother was there and another when my dad came back. I remember thinking about my mom. I could understand her being with him, but why did you bring all of us into it? Why did you bring children into this energy, this relation, this deal that you had with this man, okay? Later in life, I would learn through therapy, I got the message that mother could not protect us. I would have to work that out. And that also kind of revealed to me a pattern that I've had to work on my whole life, that it wasn't really safe to be with women. Because the first idea of woman was my mother, and it's like, why didn't she get us out of this relationship? But then later on, I had to resolve my feelings towards women because I matured physically. I was attracted to them strongly. So there was this schism in me that's carrying on. And it's kind of cool because you figure this out as you're going on. Of course, women have their own divine and perfect role, and yet I had to overcome and come to terms with these understandings that I had. And I said, again, I would have to work that out. Again, I would find out things, teachings about group souls, and some schools have taught that we chose our parents. Wow. I heard something better that I liked, and it said our karma chose our parents. Because why would I choose to be in a difficult situation? It doesn't make sense. But I remember one of my spiritual teachers talked about that our karma really chooses the circumstances in. So that tends to side, it pushes to the side of, well, somehow we contribute to this. We have a responsibility. We have a life lesson. So that helped me kind of, okay, let me work on this. Let me kind of accept this. What's my part? And then I would say, well, what did I do that attracted the family I got, especially my father? I could understand that a group of souls could come back together and be together in a family because we all had lessons to teach each other. You don't look at your brother or sister and think, what things do we have to work out, right? We're not taught that. We don't look at each other like that, but it could very well be an aspect of our relationship. But I wasn't ready for the idea of karma. And I'm kind of speaking from the child's point of view, okay? When I was a little boy, when my sister was scared, we wanted to protect her, but still I had this rudimentary feeling that things had not happened for no reason. This is another lifelong pattern that helped me. Again, when I reached for it, the answers came from inside myself. And often I felt, even though I was a child, that I had access to a wisdom that was beyond the years of my life. There was this sense that I felt I was trapped by the body. I wanted to make things happen faster. In my little world, I started to believe I could make things better. I think I already knew the power of the mind, the power of thoughts. Maybe I wasn't big enough to do anything, but I think I had already stumbled on the power of energy. And here's another concept, that we think that we're these weak, powerless beings, but there's something in me that I was tapping into that's saying, well, there's still something here that we can do. There's still something I can form. I got to figure it out. And that's what stumbled onto this idea of the power of energy. I prayed for things. Little kids get underestimated. This is really cool. But you should never underestimate the belief of kids can have in unseen things like hope and faith. Little boys and girls have caused a lot of things to come to pass. I thought that was sweet. This led to a lifelong belief in the power of prayer. I never had these kinds of negative associations that people have with churches or religions, or when they lose faith in people and they turn away from God. They seem to be unable to have an image of angels, and they give up a belief in things that only faith can help you see. I knew that God or the angels did not live in the buildings called churches, or did not live alone just there, or that God was only in men who were priests. God was in our hearts. Maybe the big people would tell us who God was, but I knew that God was a feeling, and whether the big people did good or bad things did not change that for me. I had enough experience to know that this energy that we as humans are taught is God has many forms. So you can see that the spiritual formation was happening early on. I was trying to reconcile my position as a child with this soul awareness, that I wasn't getting from any outer place. My parents weren't teaching, I wasn't going to church in a sense. It was like already in me, and yet I was discovering it, right? Years later, when I got to know the names of the angels, even the archangels, I could believe in these things already. I had remembrances where I could feel these things coming out of my back. It was like an unfolding. It was uncomfortably slightly, because it felt physically like something was happening. I'm talking about this experience in my own body, in my back, my shoulders, lower here. I would look, of course there was nothing there, but I had this unmistakable sense that it was real. They felt like wings. I felt this even in my 20s, my 30s too. I felt like they may be invisible, but I didn't feel like a creature. But why would I believe in wings? I remember telling this story to a man who I met who would be a spiritual mentor to me. He smiled and motioned to another friend he was with. He gave me his response by the light he had in his eyes. When the time came and I would first learn of something about Saint Germain and these beings of light called Ascended Masters, I could believe that also. I could at least walk that path for a while and find out. I did not have a block to such things. Really, up until that point, all we had ever heard of was Jesus. And I'm just kind of incorporating, what we were learning here in the West. At this point, I could clearly look back and already had a cumulative experience of confirmation. Things were confirming for me. I guess it could be called a quickening. Of course, the fabric of Saint Germain's immemorial had already been etched in my inner being. The drawings of childhood I had, the lifelong promptings of spirit. But I still had to deal with parts of family life that were troublesome. They say your parents are your first examples of how a child sees God. I'm glad I must have came in with a pretty clear idea of who God was, because this Jack, my father, would not have inspired me to the things of the divine nature. Still, I knew later in my path I had to reconcile my experiences with my human father. It may have been a mature way to deal with it, but I think it's important, or it may not, what did I say? It may have been a mature way to deal with it, but I think it's important that we do not leave hanging out some negative portrayal of any soul. I always kind of knew that's important. No matter what you view of people, it's important, and how can I, move through that? My father did provide a good structure, and we all had a physical home. And he tried his best, as he knew, to raise a family. In his own way, he kept his responsibilities. Still, I have had some necessary inner dialogues that my child soul needed to have his voice heard too, to be listened to. I did not always know we have an inner father too. My connection with my father never did develop much progress in human love, or certainly fatherly love. There was mostly reconciliation with my father from the soul state, and only after I grew spiritually, then I could fathom, even fashion, some love towards him. But it was often about forgiveness and acceptance, not really joy. I had a recovery relationship with my father filled with principles brought from 12-step programs. Am I almost up on time, Dave? Okay. Good. In a way, I did not want this relationship to interfere with my relationship with my Heavenly Father, the Great Spirit, the I Am that I Am, Wankan Tonka of my American Indian ideals. I wondered what kind of soul he might have been, speaking about my father. Mostly at best, in his death and by my own maturation, some compassion grew towards him. I thought of his soul. Where he might re-embody? What was my karma with him? How come he seemed to treat me more like a rival than a son? And Freud talks about these complexes with the mother and the father and the children, the siblings, and that the father could have a rivalry with the son for the affections of the mother. And it's kind of interesting because it kind of seemed my dad wasn't really on my side, and it kind of, it just had to deal with it. Sorry, Dad, I had to put it into the flame. I just want to share at one point, I had this dream at some